thanks to the AA. Need to renew your AA car insurance? Go to the aa.ie/myAA.
Warm and sunny across the country this afternoon, but some heavy showers developing in the late afternoon and evening in Munster, South Leinster and Connacht. Top temperatures of 16 to 20 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
And you're very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of the Irish independent football journalist Daniel McDonnell and broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward. Remember, our football coverage brought to you thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. Every week we're taking a World Cup year, a bit of escapism in these serious times. And this year it is 2006, hosted by Germany, won by Italy against France in the final.
The referee has gone across now with his hand in his pocket. He's been told about it. It's off. It's red. It's Zidane. The assistant referee, whether the fourth official saw something because of the delay, Dominic is sarcastically applauding.
You can't argue with that.
The referee, belatedly, the man who sent off Wayne Rooney, is about to send off Zinedine Zidane.
In terms of the decision, as long as they've seen it, it is impossible to argue against it.
This is the incident. Materazzi had an arm round Zidane there. Then they looked at each other. Why did this go on so long?
Well, I think words were obviously said, were that? Obviously, Materazzi said something.
There it is. Oh, you can't excuse that. Zidane's career ends in disgrace.
You can't boo the referee.
The fourth man to be sent off in a World Cup final. Two Argentines in 1990 and Desailly of all people in 98. And Zidane goes. France will play the remainder with 10 men.
Lads, I was just kind of watching the Prime movie about this and listening to that commentary of John Motson and Mark Lawrence and thinking how hard it is to win a World Cup. You've got Germany, the hosts, loads of momentum. You've got Italy in there that win it eventually. Argentina flopping in the quarter-final with the decision-making on the touchline when I thought they had it won. And Zidane running the whole tournament and then losing in the final with that headbutt. And Johnny, you've brightened up my day already on Twitter by saying that you're wearing cologne for this broadcast.
I didn't quite say cologne, no, but I am wearing aftershave. I was just spotting my aftershave today, and I was like, I actually forget putting on aftershave. It's been that long, so just for you, JD, but also for Dan as well. Have a bit of aftershave on for the show today.
Well, I think someone did actually respond on Twitter and with the cologne joke. So, John, Johnny probably has to mute his mentions now for all the grief he gets for his hot takes.
Do you know what it was, Dan? I was actually desperately trying to get the last player in my 11 players who have never played together before. So that took up my time for the last half an hour with a little bit of conferring with my AstroTurf football group. And I think I've finally got there.
We'll have that between 4 and 5, lads. World Cup 2006. Dan, you were telling me on Twitter as well that you were watching some of this with Ollie Byrne in some bizarre country.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. I mean, people don't necessarily want all our personal recollections.
Yeah, no, we'll get to the match.
They do.
But they are part of it, you know, I guess. And a lot of the texts that we get from people, as we know, is that they associate World Cups with a particular time in their life. That's part of the thing on a Saturday. And, you know, 98 was school for a lot of people I know. For me, 2006 was a bit different. I would have been 23, 24, trying to make my way as a freelance journalist. And one of the best bits of advice, you know, for any freelance is don't say no to anything. And so that summer I would have been pretty busy freelancing, and I actually joined the Independent later that year. But, like, you know, I would have been mainly working with the Star. Great time there. And one of the things that come up was to go, because I think Paul Lennon probably would have been at the World Cup, and I think Mark McCadden would have been away, opportunity to go away to Lithuania with Shelburne. And for some reason, for an Intertoto Cup game, for some reason the flights were Sunday to Thursday or something. It ended up one of these long trips, and it is what I associate that World Cup with. I don't necessarily remember where I was for a huge part of the matches, but I remember being in a hotel bar in Lithuania with the great Ollie Byrne, the legendary Ollie Byrne, what turned out to be his last ever European trip. You know, Shelburne won the league later in 2006, but the club was crumbling, and there's almost a sadness. And even earlier this morning, I looked back over to see what I was writing, and I remember Ollie spun us, those of us that were there spun some yarn to us about how they were in the middle of talks with two businessmen who were going to inject 30-40 million quid into the club, and where they ran it as a back page story thinking this was great, and unfortunately it wasn't coming to pass. And Ollie used to never stray too far from the hotel lobby. He was always afraid, I think, that someone would be ripping him off or something if he went too far away. But great times, great chats with him, and an incredible man. So honestly, I had to do a fair bit of research for this one, because I recall individual games, and moments like Zidane and Portugal, England, and stuff we'll talk about in Argentina. But a lot of the tournaments I would have been pretty much working and doing other stuff, and I'm probably not watching as much of that as any other. I've been lucky to be at the ones since then, and the ones prior to that you're sort of watching them really slavishly. But that 06 for me, well, it seems to be a great tournament. I feel like I missed a lot of it, so I actually quite enjoyed going back over it.
Texting here in 53106 to get the ball rolling, folks, because this is just great stuff. I was in Courmayeur on the Italian side of Mont Blanc Tunnel for the 06 final. I was 16 and was away with a pipe band for a week at the festival. Italy won the semis the day we arrived, and the final was we played the last night we were there. We were on the French border, so the tension was unbelievable. There was a screen set up in the outdoor area like a beer garden, essentially. When Zidane was sent off, the place erupted, only beaten by the roar when Grosso's penalty went in. The street party that night was wild. Bacardi breezers poured from the balconies and a rave in the back of a moving pickup truck. Only a small part of it. Johnny, where were you in 2006?
A bit of a strange one, this one for me. I started off the tournament in Dublin. I was working for Setanta, now Air Sports, at the time, and I distinctly remember early enough in the tournament, if not at the start, but certainly before the tournament had developed, I had to write a tipping column. And I tipped up France to win the tournament at 15-1. And I remember the price because it's a little bit unusual to get a 15-1. And it was kind of one of these really strange French teams in that they were an absolute kind of mess for much of the tournament. But I was just hoping that if they got out of the group, that it might click for them. And they had Zidane. And it looked like Dominic was barely even managing the team. Like, it looked like he had a very slender hold over proceedings. But sure enough, it kind of nearly clicked. And strangely enough, then, for the end of the tournament, my friend had invited me to come over to the south of France. So I watched the Portugal-France game, the semi-final. I watched that in Aix-en-Provence, which is a really, really swish part of France. And I remember watching it with French fans and everyone saying sur la rue afterwards, everyone out onto the streets. But remember thinking that during the game they seemed to be more interested in talking to each other than actually watching the game. I think that might be a particular part of France where football isn't that big, but just being absolutely gutted in the final. It was Beauty versus the Beast, and the Beast won in Materazzi getting Zidane sent off, and my bet went down to Swanee. But John, watching the video back this morning of the tournament, it just made me so miss football even more, just watching these absolute icons that I grew up watching, and to think what fun we could have watching football now, and just hopefully we'll have some normality back in the coming months. But this was a great tournament.
Yeah, I went to the Switzerland-Ukraine game, and I don't mind that. It was probably the worst game of football ever played. A goalless draw. Swiss missed 3 penalties. Ended up in the Papa Joe's bar in Cologne, and it still exists. There was a mechanical doll playing jazz music. We were drinking with the Swiss until 4 a.m. after being in the Mungersdorfer Stadion. And the way I got,
you weren't controlling the doll, John.
No, I was not controlling the doll. The tickets we got, myself and my pal Simon, who actually listens to this in Brussels. He listens to it probably on a Wednesday, so we'll hear it next Wednesday. We didn't have any contact, so we just got the tickets. The touts were actually looking for tickets. That's the way it worked. That the touts looked for the tickets, and then you went up to the tout, and they actually were the people that had the tickets. So Emirates Airlines is on my ticket, which, given it was Switzerland Ukraine, actually got it for face value. They couldn't give them away for Switzerland Ukraine, but the German organisation, lads, was incredible. The stadium, I felt that any seat in the house would have been a great one. We'll speak to Ger Gilroy after 4 o'clock, because he was there for 40 days and he went to the semi-final in Dortmund and the final. But as you'd expect from the Germans, they would organise things well. And I had a bit of money on Italy, and I ordered these, when you think of Maradona shirt or these kind of polyester glossy shirts, I ordered an Italian shirt. I thought it would be like Tardelli shirt. And I got this cotton shirt that was a few sizes too small, and ended up watching the final in Doyle's pub in Dublin. and got so tired and emotional watching Italy win that I had to be picked up by my sister who lived in Bray. So that was my World Cup in 2006. But
I think this show is over now, to be honest.
It is, yeah. The show's over. Unfortunately, we didn't qualify. And I'm kind of thinking, guys, the Marseillaise being sung by Irish fans in Paris in October 2004, and you think this is really going to be a great campaign for Brian Kerr and the Republic of Ireland team. But the Israel games cost us, and then France ended up in the final. We don't end up even being there.
Yeah, I mean, there is almost like an overlap between the Irish campaign and the French story, and like the French story that brings France all the way to the final. Because, of course, France had all these retirements at the start of that passage, the start of that series, and then I sort of vaguely remember covering that beat, the story of Zidane coming back and Makelele and Thuram, and I mean, I suppose in a way, in hindsight, like, France were there for the taking maybe in Paris, and you had the John O'Shea miss, and that was France at their most vulnerable. And even with Domenech, it was always a very fragile relationship he had with his team. He wasn't picking, the story went that he wasn't picking Robert Pires because he was a Scorpio, and he had other
that ruled me out, so.
Yeah, he had other, well, yeah, but good reason.
That was a lack of ability.
You'd be more of a scorpion than a Scorpio in a racing term. But the thing about it was that, like, that French team grew as the group went on, almost in tandem with the Irish team losing its way. And it's actually sad, because I actually went back last week to ended up on a bit of a tangent and watching, it's on YouTube, it was the RTE coverage of the night of Brian Kerr's last game. It was
very harsh panel, actually, that, I thought.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite cold,
It was after the game with Switzerland, and I mean, it was possibly reflective of a lot of things that were going on at the moment. I mean, it probably would be no secret, and I've expressed this view, that the RTE panel seemed to be on reasonably good terms with the FAI chief executive at the time, although they were quite critical of him during the Steve Staunton era, ironically. But I think that, like, the wind was blowing against Brian Kerr, and I think that studio reflected it, and then probably reflected the view of a certain section. In saying that, the description of and I remember being at that Ireland-Switzerland game, the performance wasn't good, and they probably did end up punting the ball into the box a lot, and they had lost their way a bit. So you can't really, airbrush history completely. But at the same time, it was a campaign that really was one or two kicks to the ball from swinging in a completely dramatic direction. And those Israel games killed the momentum, because Ireland were set up to just the way the group panned out. Like, every game was a draw apart from Henry's goal in Dublin against Ireland. All the other games between the main protagonists were draws. So that was the margin.
Yeah, I was in Israel, and they conceded a 90th minute equaliser. It was just an absolute sickener. And then Dublin, we were 2-0 up. Robbie Keane then went off, and then they made it 2-2, and it sucked the air out of it. And we even could have got to a playoff if we'd beaten Switzerland that night. I think Duff was injured, and it just kind of petered out, was the way I kind of felt. That it just kind of fizzled out, that whole campaign. Whether Brian should have got another term is probably moot now. But it's a shame, because we did have good players. We'd Duff, we'd Robbie Keane, we'd John O'Shea, we'd Steve Finnan, we'd Richard Dunn. We good players back then.
Yeah, and we only conceded 5 goals in that campaign, and obviously it would be remembered as Brian Kerr's era. We had Brian on last week. I remember that. I think the most game I remember from that group was one of the 2 Israel games, actually. The 2 all at home. I remember the histrionics of the keeper on the occasion in Lansdowne Road when Ireland looked like they were home and hose, essentially, after going 2-0 up. And I just remember how gutting it was to concede the goal in Tel Aviv, and just how deep Ireland were in the second half. I think maybe that's something that Stephen Kenny will hope his sides don't do when they take the lead, because I thought Ireland in that particular campaign, they were quite conservative in the way they played at times, and we were still as close as we got. I remember being at the Switzerland game, and we never looked like scoring, and I actually lost a lot of my love for Robbie Keane that night. I remember he was taken off with roughly 20-25 minutes to go, and I remember we were in desperate need of a goal, and he literally trudged off the pitch, like basically through a sulk. And I know he was disappointed to be taken off, but at that time we just needed to get the game going again. And it was a disappointing campaign, but I think Brian was a little bit hard done by as well. I think he deserved another go at it.
Well, Mick got another go. Mick got 3 campaigns. And what happened afterwards, was worse. So, look, it's probably a debate for another day, but I think Brian definitely should have got another campaign. Looking back 15 years later. England, guys, I think it's just the same old story. A quarter-final exit. Sven Lampard, Gerrard, the golden generation not performing. Owen Hargreaves, to me, was a star. And Rooney getting sent off.
And some of the other stars of that generation, Cheryl Cole, Victoria Beckham, the rest of the Wags, because like that was the Wags World Cup too. I mean, that was and you can't actually avoid that, because there's even it sounds sort of frivolous to even discuss it, but it was actually a big talking point after the tournament. Like, had the Wags in some way influenced England's performance, because it turned into such a circus? And then 4 years later in South Africa, Capello banned wives and girlfriends and went for a completely different approach, which didn't work either. So it comes back to football ultimately in the end. But I think Beckham, for some reason, wanted the wives and girlfriends nearby. Maybe it was good for the brand or whatever. But again, like it is almost the same old story with England. Although it's strange, like I didn't, and I don't know about you lads, but like if you'd asked me in a sort of a quiz question beforehand who missed the England penalties in the shootout, like you remember all the ones from 90 and 96 and even David Batty in 98. I would have struggled to remember that it was Lampard.
It's almost like you're sensing this inevitability about it at that stage.
Yeah, but also so much of it became wrapped up in the sending off of a character, like and Beckham's injury and Rooney's dismissal against Portugal in that game. And it's almost like the heat was taken off the people who missed the penalty. But England ultimately, despite being down to 10 or whatever, like they got through it and got to a situation where if they just had better penalty technique, they would have gone through, and that's 3 World Cups where their story ends that way. And I mean, it doesn't seem, I mean, they weren't great in the competition. They obviously, they nicked a couple of late goals in games and the results probably look better than their performances. But it was a sort of that was England's golden generation team, I guess. Owen was young enough, but obviously still, injured and he would admit himself probably already well past his best. Wayne Rooney was the coming star. But then you had the Gerrard, Lampard, Ferdinand. But like, I mean, to even go back to it, I mean, they were like a lot of big names, and it does seem like they were a lot of big names, but not really a team. And maybe we'll talk about the Italy team that wins it. And I know they had some stars in it, but there was much more of a group, squad, dynamic effort to their thing. Whereas with England around that time, there probably wasn't.
It was Carragher and Lampard, and the only reason I know that is because I was watching it in Dulwich. I was all over the place that summer. I was watching it in Elephant and Castle in London. That's the only reason it was kind of seared into my brain. 53106. Kerr's last game against the Swiss was one of the most flat Ireland performances considering what was at stake. The optimism around Kenny now reminds me of the optimism that was there at the start of the Kerr reign. Well, Brian kind of only had a half campaign for the Euros. And what's wrong with optimism? Don't forget Graham Poll handing 3 yellow cards to Simonovic in the Croatia versus Australia game in Stuttgart. Super match which I was at with Mike Downey. That is from Dan Downey. The only World Cup I've ever been to, went to 3 games, including Spain, Ukraine and Leipzig. Spain were awesome that day. That is from Justin Mason. And JP Lonergan in touch to say, I ordered the Trinidad and Tobago jersey that April for the World Cup in June. It arrived in August.
Yeah, JP would have been working with me in Setanta actually for that tournament. That reminds me of buying the Saudi Arabia jersey, because apparently Saudi Arabians were going to take over Go United. So I bought the Saudi Arabia jersey for the World Cup. It arrived on the day of the first game, in which they were beaten 5-0 or something.
You'll have to buy the Newcastle one now instead, Johnny.
Yeah, but
or maybe not.
Just, on England in that World Cup, I just remember them not being very good, and it was the old story of Lampard and Gerrard playing together but not really functioning and basically kind of limping their way through the tournament, just not playing well. Obviously Owen got injured early on as well, and I remember they were quite flat. Like they never really looked like they were a team that was actually functioning that well. It wasn't a great surprise that they got knocked out, but I suppose the cream did rise to the top in the end.
53106 and JP Lonergan finishing his tweet here to say it should have been Riquelme's World Cup, of course. I remember watching this, I don't know where it was, I think it was in Amsterdam or somewhere, and I was so annoyed and frustrated for Argentina that they really were let down on the touchline by Peckerman. He took off Riquelme after 72 minutes. They were leading Germany 1-0 in Berlin, and then Messi as well wasn't put on at all. He was left on the bench. That could have been Messi's best chance. They had a really good team. They had Hernan Crespo. They hammered Serbia 6-0. He had Maxi Rodriguez with that beautiful hit against Mexico. I thought this team was really something, and I thought they blew it on the touchline, lads. Don't know if you agree.
Listen, go on, John. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, Dan. I'm trying to remember when I was on about the betting. I'm trying to remember who was favourites for this tournament, but they were certainly up there. And like you were just looking at Riquelme and thinking, if ever a tournament was made for a man, and he was absolutely brilliant. And it was as you say, John, it was that negativity of taking him off against Germany, and it's the old question: like, do you sit back in a lead and try to bleed the game out, or do you try to go for a counter-attack goal? And I do remember Argentina basically threw it away that World Cup.
Well, they had to waste a substitution with a goalkeeper. I mean, by the way, I love that every game JD mentions, it does appear like he was in a different country at the time while it was on.
There's a reason for that.
Who knows where he's going to end up by the end? We'll discuss some other games, but or Giles, as we know, was the answer. But I was all over Argentina that summer. I definitely had a financial investment in Argentina to win the thing, and I was pretty confident about it because they were so good. And that Serbia game, I mentioned earlier, like I said, my specific recollection of the tournament, you know, it's not like comprehensive, but the number of passes before one of the goals against Serbia, and the Maxi Rodriguez volley, the Maxi volley against Mexico, who as usual go out in the last 16. but this was Argentina's time. I actually remember also like getting so caught up in it. I bought some Argentina jersey now. I think it was like a knockoff one in Dunn's or somewhere, but it looked like an Argentina jersey, and it was very much meant to be the summer of their time. This was their time. And the game against Germany, I mean, Peckerman, was the manager of Colombia in 2014 when they had that great run in the World Cup with James Rodriguez and so on, he's still getting asked. It follows him around for the rest of his life about leaving Messi on the bench against Germany. Now, in his defense, in fact, even earlier this year, Scalia, the new Argentina manager, was appointed, and he was asked because he was a player in that World Cup for Argentina. Like it was like a question at the press conference, almost like a weird saipan loop that it has to come up at some stage about Messi being left on the bench. But in his slight defence, the goalkeeper, they had to make a change with the goalkeeper, which was forced. And I think there was another situation that there was a forced change, and then he took off Riquelme, of course, for Cambiasso, which was a defensive switch. And then when Germany scored, he obviously just panicked and went for the big man option by bringing on Julio Cruz. And it wasn't just Messi on the bench. I think it was probably Saviola as well, was it? Who was also left bench. Now, in the rules that exist now, you'd be able to get an extra sub, an extra time. And it wasn't available then. But it does seem like a massive aberration. And maybe even for Messi, we have this Messi theme. Like maybe this was his time. Just like Mbappe, It might be that last summer was his 2018, was his World Cup. And it came very early, but everything fell together. That should have been the moment. And I mean, he blew it, I guess. It'll always follow them. I put it up earlier. Someone on Twitter was saying they wouldn't have got past, Italy and France, and maybe they would have been too stubborn and quality all around the park to do them. But I don't know. The Argentina group was pretty talented, and if they got by the hosts, which is always a substantial thing, it might have been their moment.
They probably had the best team in the tournament.
Yeah. I was just going, what are you doing? I was lying on a hotel room bed going, what are you doing? You're like throwing this away with your fear and your defensive tactics.
I genuinely feel, John, I've seen this World Cup through your body at this stage.
It's just because Jeff Ogilvy won the US Open. That's the only reason why I remember this World Cup. Great show as always, lads. Thanks so much for your text. That's very nice. 53106. The Argentina team were something else. Don't know how they didn't win the tournament, but looking back now, I had totally forgotten about Peckerman's woeful management. Also, Cambiasso, what a passer of the ball. That is from Joe. I didn't expect the Germans to do well, lads. I thought the Germans were in a bit of a dip, but actually they surprised me. I gotta love the matching shirts, the Klinsmann and Love, who obviously took over the team, and Ballack was the captain, and they had the momentum of being the host country. And actually, when I was doing some research for this week, I was interested that Podolski and Klose were both born in Poland and moved to Germany as young children.
I didn't know that about Klose. I knew it about Podolski, but I don't know which of the tournaments we were looking at in the last few weeks, and there wasn't much expectation about the Germans. But it is the old après-match joke. You don't write off the Germans because they just turn up at World Cups, and they turned up at this World Cup, and they mightn't have had the greatest team in the world, but they'd Miroslav Klose up front, probably somewhere in that 15-year peak that he enjoyed at World Cups. Like what an absolute legend of a World Cup player, to be fair, for a fella at club level that I suppose maybe in Ireland we didn't take an awful lot of notice of him. But what struck me, John, was watching it back again, and you're probably better able to recall this, was there was a real patriotism about the Germans, and it was it's kind of it was probably a dangerous theory in Germany to actually really believe in your country again, but it really seemed to take over the country during that summer, and the country really got behind them, and it must have been magic for the German fans on their home turf, and I'd say for a long time they believed they might do it as well.
This is from our producer, Neil Tracy. I was in Germany at Easter 2006. The family can't emphasise enough how much of a superstar Podolski was at the time. They absolutely adored him. Also text in here on 53106 about the 2006 World Cup. Italy was in turmoil before the World Cup with the Juventus scandal. The team came together like the 1982 team. I remember watching the final in Dublin just before my graduation in UCD. It's a strange one, guys. I think it was Zidane's tournament. But we'll get to that on 53106 after this break. This is Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. Back after this.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
Across Ireland, people have been coming together to support the vulnerable and each other. And News Talk and Bank of Ireland are coming together to recognise many of these community heroes. So, let's hear from you. If you're a charity or community group who's doing all you can to get through these unprecedented times, go to newstalk.com/communityheroes and tell us your story. All next week, we'll be hearing from organisations throughout the country working to protect our well-being and keep our spirits up. Community Heroes on News Talk with Bank of Ireland. Go to newstalk.com/communityheroes.
QuoteDevil.ie can save you money on your car insurance, van insurance or home insurance. QuoteDevil.ie also specialise in car insurance for first-time drivers, young drivers and difficult-to-insure cases.
The Quote Devil's always got one hell of a quote.
Quote Devil Limited is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
COVID-19 is a major public health emergency here in Ireland and around the world. It's having a big impact on every aspect of our lives. We are now asked to stay at home with limited exceptions. This is especially hard for older people and those who've been advised to cocoon. Being isolated from friends and family is hard for everyone. So right now, it's important that we look out for each other and look after our neighbours. That's why national government, local government and the community and voluntary sectors have all come together to create the Community Call. To make sure that anyone who needs help can get help. And to make sure that people who would like to volunteer in their community can help where they are most needed. If you need help, if you know someone who needs help, or if you'd like to offer help, please call 0818 222 024 or call your local authority Community Call Helpline. All the details are live now at gov.ie, supported by the Government of Ireland.
Cocooning. We all know it makes sense, but it can be tough, especially if you're a grandparent missing your grandkids. At Family Friendly HQ, Ireland's trusted parenting community, we want to help. So we've teamed up with Children's Books Ireland to launch a new video just for grandparents. It's a step-by-step video guide on how to read books with your grandchildren using online technology. There's also a reading hub with suggestions for recommended books. So stay safe and enjoy reading together while staying apart. Check out our free video guide at familyfriendlyhq.ie. #ShareAStory.
The Lotto jackpot is an estimated €2.5 million. If you'd like to play any of your favourite National Lottery games from home, just download the app or visit lottery.ie. Play responsibly, play for fun.
The National Standards Authority of Ireland have published a series of business guidance documents to help businesses struggling to deal with the impact of COVID-19. Whether you're a small retailer or a large manufacturer, we can offer you practical steps to help you meet the public health guidelines and reduce the risk of spreading infection. For more information on our guidelines and how to contact us, visit us at nsai.ie. This is an initiative of the Government of Ireland.
At Centra, we have everything you need with great offers like Centra Fresh Irish Pork Chops 425 gram, only €3. Centra Family Meals 1.2 kilo range, just €5 each. And our mega deal until Sunday, Rockshore 20 bottle box, only €20. Centra. Live every day. Enjoy, call sensibly.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
And you're very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of the Irish Independent journalist Daniel McDonnell and Johnny Ward, the broadcaster and journalist, to speak about World Cup 2006. When it was hosted by Germany and won by Italy against France in the final. We're streaming live as well as now. You can get in touch with us on the Off the Ball social channels. At Off the Ball is our Twitter handle. You can watch us on YouTube, on Periscope and on Facebook, as always, every week. So, Formal Friday, that was yesterday. We asked you to join us supporting those in the front line by dressing up to the nines, and join us, you really did. Thank you so much. We raised over €150,000 to help our frontline heroes. It's not too late. If you still want to take part, just go to offtheball.com/donate and give what you can now to pay it forward for the thousands of people who need it most right now. And thank you so much, everybody, for your support to raise over €150,000 for frontline heroes. Lads, when I was thinking about Zidane, like even just watching some of the footage, the sweat pouring off him, he looked so primed physically, the taut nature, the focus that he had. He ran the show against Spain. Then he had that cross for Henry to score against Brazil, penalty in the semi-final, ice cold in the final, the penalty, and then he gets sent off walking past the World Cup. He didn't win it, but it was his tournament. I'm glad, lads, that he'd won it 8 years previously.
Yeah, and he does feature in my 11. There's a little bit of a suggestion as to my team, but I don't know if he was my favourite player ever, but was certainly up there. I would advise anyone to watch the video with the Mogwai soundtrack of just 90 minutes of him on the pitch. Although he actually ended up getting sent off in the video, but that tournament, you know, you remember how he was suspended for the last group game, which France needed to win, and obviously the narrative was that could be his last game for France. And you're thinking, oh my God, what an anticlimactic way for one of the true greats to bow out of international football. But the way he bowed out, I think that the issue of sledging and all that is definitely interesting. Like, some people will kind of say it's okay, but I'd love to know how normal people would react to what Materazzi did to Zizou. But it was a shocking end, because his performance against Brazil, I remember France were 4-1 to win that game. They were still not really all that fancied. Brazil were considered hot favourites, and I really fancied France to do them. I just thought they were coming to hand, and the final then just, what can you say about it? Like, it was absolutely sickening to watch. And as much as I love Italian defence and, you know, the way that they played the game, I thought that was horrible, to be honest. It was a horrible way for it to end for one of the best players that I've ever seen, anyway. And
he should have scored as well, possibly, if Buffon hadn't have saved it. Just actually something that Johnny touched upon there, Dan. Brazil, they've started now in the last few tournaments to lose to European opposition, and they looked a degree. Ronaldo looked overweight. Ronaldinho wasn't in the same position, and they don't travel well. Apart from the Sweden in '58, they haven't travelled well, and it's kind of come unstuck for them in recent World Cups.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose '98. I guess I don't think you can say they should have won the thing, but obviously they were insanely good, and then obviously something went wrong. But yeah, the sort of '06, it wasn't really a very memorable campaign for them, as you say, and obviously that would have been around the time that Brazil would have been awarded the hosting rights for 2014, and probably embarked on this journey that led to them maybe having a conservative type of coach, at various times. And we have this obviously tradition of, like, we imagine Brazilian football and we speak of it in very romantic terms, and understandably so, with all the great memories. But they've actually ended up with at various times Duggan and Scolari and more managers who might be considered to be more defensive, and they're just looking for the winner's formula as opposed to necessarily one that makes you fall in love with a Brazilian side. And I don't know, do some of the disappointments colour them? Just as in that tournament, and not to go off the tangent on your point, but Johnny spoke about Germany before the break. I went looking back over the old coverage, and of course that Germany team, they were starting their reboot after 2000 and 2002 not being a particularly popular side to watch. And they were a very entertaining team in '06, and there was a sense that maybe the trend in football is moving towards this, attacking, vibrant style of play. And actually Brazil, who you'd think would be exponents of it, possibly weren't that way over the next decade. And in that tournament, they were just done by, it was like a triumph for as Johnny mentioned earlier on, like there was so many icons prominent in the story of this tournament, whereas in other competitions we speak about unlikely stars and heroes emerging, whereas this one, it was like the pillars of the club game at that point, the really big characters and personalities, and not just like Zidane and sort of the marquee ones, but even ones like who are obviously legends, but internationally they had been a bit hit and miss, like Del Piero and Totti. They all had their moment across the tournament, and that France team, in some respects, and we spoke about it earlier on, they had a lot of, it was an old team in some respects, you know, Thuram and Makelele and Zidane, they were coming towards the end of the road very much, but it was like, you know, you could run through it and talk about players who've played in Champions League finals, World Cup finals in some cases, and as the tournament went on, that actually shone through, and it got them nearly all the way to the, you know, almost got them the keys to the kingdom.
Young Frank Ribery as well, and Kaká never really caught fire for Brazil as an international player.
Even think, like, I mean, honestly, like that Brazil team to me, like, you know, would if I said Brazil 2060, I think you'd have to think about it. You know,
would,
when people talk about the, you know, 1982 and the great Brazilian teams that should have been, and 98 for obvious reasons, but again, I would have had to. I knew France had knocked them out, but like if you'd asked me again to remember their other games, I would have found it pretty difficult.
What do you think about Portugal?
Yeah, I mean, this was an area, of course, where Portugal just needed, the feeling was that Portugal just needed that really top-class striker because they had an exceptional team. And that was like a coming together of generations where you had the young Ronaldo, but Figo was still on the scene. And they'd messed up 04 when they should have won it really on home soil and didn't against Greece. And I know they had Pauletta and they had Maniche, but they maybe didn't have that player to get them across, you know, that the sort of the predatory striker to sort of complement their home. Because we didn't talk about Ronaldo as a predatory striker in those days. It was early Ronaldo, and obviously he became a number 9 in latter years. But they were obviously a side that, like, they came through some. They were cynical enough in their own way. The Dutch game, I saw Aidan O'Hara, my colleague, tweeting earlier. He was at that. That was a particularly nasty match. And Portugal, they took themselves to like a historic. They were close. They were almost there. But they probably didn't have a great striker at the time, that team. That probably was something that held them back.
53106, guys. I'm out painting a deck. The show is getting through the pain. Well, we're delighted that you're listening. I remember winning a surf holiday in Portugal on News Talk in 2006. I spent a week doing very little surfing but watching football in the beach bars. Portugal beat Holland in the last 16 and the Lisbon then went mental. But my main memory was the semi-final, Italy against Germany in Dortmund Stadium. What a match. And as a defender myself, Fabio Cannavaro was my hero. That is from Colin in Stepaside in Dublin. Very nice text on 53106.
Yeah, on Cannavaro, John, actually. I remember another tip that I had in the tournament was the Portugal game, but I tipped Cannavaro to be man of the match at 33-1. And he had an absolutely outstanding tournament, outstanding tournament and outstanding game. And he was brilliant in that game, but he didn't get man of the match. But he was absolutely superb in that tournament. And like when I was putting together the 11 players, I just couldn't quite get him in because obviously I had another Italian in the lineup. But he was one of my favourite players. And that Italian team, they could defend. And it was probably no surprise that they just got over the line against France. But they were a seriously good defensive side.
And a very good manager in the Urbane, Marcello Lippi, who broke Milan's dominance in the 90s with Juventus. I was going through his kind of career, and he didn't stay at clubs very long, and then he took over Juventus, and he won the double in his first season, 94-95, and then took over Italy, and they were obviously dogged by that scandal of match fixing. But he seemed to generate a real bond and unity and team spirit with the Italian team.
His response as well to, like, if you're to say the most iconic moment of the World Cup, if you're to be quite cruel about it, it was probably Zidane, right? Yeah. And Materazzi and so forth. But if you want a moment that like just is the beauty of football, it was Grosso's goal. Just the reverse pass into him by Pirlo, the beauty of the strike, the Tardelli-esque celebration, and then the fact that, as you say, the Urbane Lippi was basically crying on the sideline. It was a goal of such magnitude as to make you just want football back right now.
You've got Buffon, you've got Cannavaro, you've got Pirlo. That is some spine, lads.
And I mean, you can't avoid it, as the texter said. I mean, like, Italy came into the tournament under a cloud. I mean, Juventus were about to get, you know, strong sanctions. And to be honest, like, I mean, that whole era of Juventus, I suppose, the late 90s, early 2000s, that Italian football, you know, the passing of time hasn't been kind to it, probably under a number of headings, really, to be honest, and not just, you know, sort of just fears about certain aspects of what was going on around that period. And, you know, you still look back, and obviously we look at Buffon and Cannavaro and legends of the game, and you speak of them in, like, you know, reverential terms. Yeah, I mean, you read the pre-2006 coverage, and some of the information and the detail about what people were alleged to have some involvement in wasn't great, but they obviously used it as to generate some kind of siege mentality. And as I said earlier on, like, it was a real squad effort for that Italian team. Like, again, just watching the official film on Prime, and I was almost wondering who was going to pop up and score for Italy next, because you had Luca Toni, you had Quinta, Inzaghi was involved, then you had Gilardino was involved, and I think I forgot another attacker maybe as well, and then Del Piero and Totti, and it's almost like it was the definition of a squad game, that tournament, like maybe more so than any tournament. I know you mentioned the spine and the outstanding players, but it feels like there was so many characters that played their part, including Materazzi's competition, which in itself was remarkable. We talk about the Zidane thing, but he only came in because of an injury to Nesta. He scored he managed to squeeze in some big goals and a sending off before being involved in one of the most iconic moments in the competition's history, which isn't bad for someone who through Premier League eyes, a lot of people knew was that bloke from Everton.
9 minutes into the game against the Czechs, he scores, sent off against Australia, as you say, gives away the penalty against France, equalises against France in the final with that header, receives the Zidane headbutt, which he deserved, and then scores in the shootout. That's some catalogue for a guy who was in his 30s at the time.
Did he deserve it, though? Did he deserve it? I mean, I'm gonna say it here. Like, clearly, like his comment to Zidane, and it's
which we don't know. We don't know what he said, by the way.
No, but he did a book, I think, around 10, 11 years later, and he's said, Materazzi has said several times that it was obviously related to, as Zidane family member, his sister. That's the commonly accepted version of the story. Now, I don't think that's really disputed at this stage. I mean, it's obviously, a horrible thing for anyone to hear, but I do sort of have the view that, I mean, if you are like sledging and stuff that's said on the pitch, if you're Zidane, across the course of your career, with his background, he will have heard and been on the receiving end of some horrendous things. And, that unfortunately, to some degree, is part of the game. I hate to say it. You don't condone it. You're not saying it should happen, but be realistic. Mad stuff is said by people when they cross the line, and it's always aimed and geared towards getting a reaction and getting in the head of whoever it might be. And it worked for him that he drew this extraordinary response from Zidane in the World Cup final. And I know he's a legend, but it was a mad loss of cool at that moment in time, and I can't imagine it's the worst thing that he's ever heard on a football pitch. I mean, I could be wrong.
So you're saying that Zidane should have had more discipline, Dan?
I think he should have. Yeah, I mean, it's a World Cup final, but I understand he's pumped up and he's in the moment, and like what makes like these people, like what elevates people to a different level is that they're configured differently to some degree. And I know it's very easy to sit in your armchair and just say, well, here's what you should have done. But I would just take the point that it's not as if like football is generally a very sedate game where people don't say inappropriate things to each other on the pitch, and all of a sudden someone says something that is completely out of the blue. It's like, I've never heard anything like this before in my life. Like, I would assume, through his years playing at a very high level against, some pretty savvy and skillful operators and manipulators, he will have encountered where stuff that crosses the line like that. And it's, if everyone responded in that way to things like that happen on the pitch, you'd have way more headbutts and people being sent off. So I think it probably was a failure of discipline as much as it's not in any way to tolerate what was said.
I think that's a fair point as well. I don't know if you saw Dennis Kerwin on Twitter during the week. He was relaying the story about how George Best, basically Alex Higgins came down to Dublin to play a game with Ken Doherty just kind of later on in his life, and he looked up at all the stuff that Ken had on the wall in his place in Dublin where he trains or whatever, and Alex Higgins looks up at the photo of George Best and he says, George, God, he wasted his life. And there is that aspect of the genius does have the frailty, and Zidane had the mental frailty that he wasn't able to deal with it, and you have to be able to deal with sledging. But if you're to talk about the three villains of football that come to mind, I would be thinking Van Bommel, Pepe, and definitely Materazzi.
Not Henry, not Henry for 2009?
Yeah, but that's bad. But like players that like were genuinely quite dirty in an era when football wasn't dirty. And Materazzi, I always remember him as being a player that was kind of prone to the odd tuggishness. And I as much as Zidane shouldn't have reacted, I could never really forgive Materazzi for that, because it ended up with Zidane obviously having that ignominious end.
The penalties were something else. Like nerves of steel for Italy to get those penalties in the way they did. Like they didn't miss any of them.
Yeah, and they have their history with missing penalties at tournaments, Italy. And again, like there was a sort of a redemption aspect, because Euro 2000 was one where they'd probably they had the golden goal, and ironically it was Trezeguet who got the goal, and then 6 years later he's missing a World Cup final penalty. And yeah, there was the execution of Italy in terms of how they sought out the competition. It's still a skill to score penalties at that level. I'm not a believer in this lottery theory. It's there is an element of that about it, but there's also like an exceptional technique and confidence and when you're in the moment, and you see what like Fabio Grosso's tournament in itself. Like he was with Palermo before the competition. I don't think he would have been a name that would have been screaming off to sort of the lips of maybe a lot of viewers in this part of the world. And I think even in Italy, his inclusion was maybe somewhat controversial, but I suppose the attacking fullback has become a real thing. It's now an accepted part of the game. And here you have a fullback who was central to key moments, and not just the brilliant goal against Germany, but there was the penalty I think against Australia as well, and then he bangs in the winner in the final. So it's almost like a fairy tale tournament for him. But there was a high quality in how he sort of technical quality and how he executed his goals, including the winning penalty. It's almost like the dream stuff. Like he hammers it into the top corner to do the job. It's spectacular.
53106 for your text messages. Materazzi said that Mayo are going to win the All Ireland. That was from Carl and Galway. There's always one. Materazzi was integral to Inter's 2010 treble-winning team, a great defender in his own right. I'm not so sure about integral. Lads, great show. Stayed with German friends for some of the tournament. For Germans, huge debate about hanging the national flag outside and wearing a national jersey. Consequently, they seemed to come out of their shell as a nation as the tournament continued and really enjoyed it. That was a great country and experience. That's from Tom. Ger Gilroy, the MD here at OTB, will be on after 4 because he was 40 days in Germany, and he can tell us all about the experience of what it was like to be around Germany for the tournament itself. He was at the semi-final and the final. And it was like Zidane was, as a Zidane fan, Johnny, was Zidane at his best at that tournament, or had you seen him better earlier in his career? Because that's one thing I'm interested in, because at 34 years of age, he never really seemed to dip in his ability and his skill and his quality, although the red mist was there because he did get sent off in the 98 World Cup.
Yeah, I don't know. In theory, you really shouldn't be at your best at that stage of your life. But in that tournament, that Brazilian performance must go down as one of the best World Cup individual performances of all time. And it was funny, Dan, saying it. I'd actually forgotten that one of my worries with France at that time was that some of their really important players were getting on a bit. But just, if you look at the showreel of what he did against Brazil, and he was just elegant, and he was just so graceful. And, as much as he was kind of a number 10, he really did absolutely dominate that game. And he was, Zidane's background is interesting because an awful lot of that French team were kind of like sons of immigrants, or sort of second generation French or whatever. And it was definitely an interesting time, I think, for that French team. They really bonded. And I wonder how much Dominic had actually to do with it, because I almost thought he was like yeah, it was almost like he was kind of a guy that was watching a movie in the cinema and just kind of didn't know what was going to happen as much as anyone else in the movie theater. I don't know if he really was like your kind of. I'd safely say when the World Cup final got down to the crunch, Lippi was probably in a more kind of advantageous position in terms of running the troops. But it was just a fascinating French team, and there were all these tales that they weren't getting on, but you were always sort of confident that they could click, and it was all to do with Zizou.
Yeah, there would have been a suggestion during the tournament that players would have had issues with some of the tactics. And I know some people would defend Dominic. I think Brian Kerr might be one, would think that some of the coverage about him has been unfair over the years. And he was obviously a bit eccentric. But Johnny is right. There was actually, I think, a storm during the tournament. Jean-Marie Le Pen, the sort of quite right-wing French politician, come out with a complaint about the racial profile of the France squad. And actually, I think that sort of language and that sort of narrative, I hate the word narrative, but that almost bonded that group together. But there was always a sense that they were maybe always a small bit at odds with their manager. But between them, they had this unity that sort of took them a good way down to peace, as we saw.
53106 for your text messages. I remember the World Cup in 2006. I just turned 20. I enjoyed it, yet as a huge soccer fan all my whole life, I could feel a certain change in the air, as if to say this was the end of an era in the type of football and the beginning of a more fast-paced attacking style of play. That's from Aaron and Galway. Don't forget, Italy were missing Nesta, one of the greatest defenders of all time. Best moment of the tournament, Grosso's goal in the semi-final, Pirlo's pass, pure football poetry, an amazing finish. God, I miss football, from James in Waterford. A mention from Mogwai and Off the Ball has made my day, has also made me realise how much I miss live music. That is from Phil. Guys, replays, does the penalty shootout in a final leave you cold, or would a replay be something that I know it's probably logistically impossible, but you have all these matches earlier in the tournament that probably don't have anything on them. Would it be better to have a replay for the final?
I don't know. I mean, I think logistically it's probably impossible. In theory, I suppose you like the idea of being sorted on the pitch, but you just can't ever see it being practically possible in a World Cup. You know, maybe your Ukraine-Switzerland game could have benefited from some extra minutes by the sounds of it to redeem the memory of it to some degree, John. The night was good.
The night was good. Don't worry.
To get value, the touts had their day. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, as much as we talk about penalties being a cruel way to exit, we also have so many magic World Cup memories that are created by the penalty shootout. Like, I see people, I think it was John Walters or someone on social media this week talking about the MLS penalty shootouts of the 90s, where the player had to dribble from the halfway line, and it was maybe a bit more skill involved with it. But I don't know. I think FIFA would never stand it because they have a very rigid ticket structure. In theory, I like the idea, but in practice, I don't think it's ever going to be troubling us.
Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the golden goal experiment. Wasn't a fan of that at all. Penalties, like, they're definitely not a lottery, and it's funny how these national caricatures seem to come to the fore in penalties, but I don't think replays are potentially all that practical in World Cup. I have had this debate that the FAI Cup in recent years has kind of ruled out replays in the earlier rounds, which I think is a bit of a shame, but fans don't seem to agree with me on it. They think that you just have to get the kind of early stages gone. But like, I have great memories of replays, supporting Galway United as a kid, and you know, especially just midweek cup replays, a bit of a magic about them. But in terms of the penalty shootout, it's not perfect, but I guess it's the best we have.
53106 for your text messages. We're concentrating on World Cup 2006 with Danny McDonnell and Johnny Ward. And if you've got any text messages or memories or views of that tournament, 53106 is the number to get in touch with us on. Just also to say as well that on Formal Friday, we asked you to join us supporting those on the front line by dressing up for the Nines. And join us, you did. Together we raised over €150,000 to help our frontline heroes. It's not too late if you still want to take part. Just go to offtheball.com/donate and give what you can to pay it forward for the thousands of people that have need it most right now. And from all of us at the Off the Ball, thank you so much for that raising of €150,000. Also between 4 and 5, we'll be speaking to Ger Gilroy about the World Cup of 2006, because he was there for 40 days. He was working and he was at the semi-final in Dortmund, which is an amazing place. I've never been to the Dortmund Stadium. And then the final in Berlin between Italy and France. What was it actually like on the ground? We'll get Ger's views after 4 o'clock. Also on 53106 listeners, we want you to answer this question about the best team in your lifetime. It has to be in your lifetime, 1 to 11, in the right positions, that kind of thing. But there's a couple of criteria. So it has to be in your lifetime. Also, you can't have a player from the same nation, 2 of them. So you can't have Messi and Maradona, for example. You can't have Roy Keane. You can't have Paul McGrath. And also the other thing as well, you can't have a player that has played for the same club, or two players that play for the same club. So you can't have Cristiano Ronaldo and the Brazilian Ronaldo, for example, because they both played for Real Madrid. But 53106, if you have your team, worth getting to us between 4 and 5 on 53106. We'll be discussing Daniel McDonnell and Johnny Ward's teams after 4. Back after this.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
Join that conversation on Facebook and Twitter.
Hello Ireland. Hello green hair drying. Hello green vacuuming. Green box set binging. Green hedge cutting. Hello green cups of coffee. Hello green family dinners. Hello 100% green electricity from Iberdrola, one of the world's biggest renewable energy companies. To get a great deal on energy you can feel good about, visit iberdrola.ie/hello. Iberdrola Ireland Limited guarantees your electricity is sourced from 100% renewable generation, subject to verification under the CRU's GSPV verification process after operating for a full year.
Hey, it's me again, the TV. Since my family gave me Now TV, there's no more endlessly searching for something they want to watch, because now I don't do filler TV, just killer TV. If my family want movies, I've got blockbusters. Comedy, yes please, way better than the dad jokes in this house. Or crime dramas, I've got loads. And they're never going to guess who did it. Now they can watch whatever they're in the mood for.
What's your TV got for you tonight? Now TV. 18 plus month passes auto renew. Terms apply.
From true crime believers to science and business achievers, sports, arts and comedy to the latest entertainment wannabe. Get political, get healthy, get educated. Get all your favourite podcasts on Go Loud. Download the Go Loud app now or add us on your smart speaker. Go Loud. Podcasts, radio and music to your ears.
Shopping. It's a bit different these days. Here are some handy hints from Dunnes Stores to help customers shop quicker and safer. Make a list before you go shopping so you can move quicker through the store and avoid browsing. If you are shopping for others, please ask us for help. To avoid queues, shop throughout the day and into the evening. We restock our shelves often, so no need to only shop early. Last but not least, always keep 2 meters between yourself and other shoppers. Dunnes Stores, always here for our customers.
COVID-19 is here, but together we can slow the spread of the virus. Remember to keep washing your hands, cough or sneeze into a tissue or your elbow, avoid touching your face and keep surfaces clean. But most importantly, stay at home. While most people can make essential trips for groceries or medicines, if you're over 70 or have a serious medical condition, you must stay at home. For information, go to hse.ie or call 1850 24 1850. Protection from coronavirus. It's in our hands. From the HSE.
In these difficult times, many businesses are still very much open for business and still need to communicate with their customers. Radio can help. Right now, it's playing an even bigger role keeping people in Ireland informed and entertained. And the latest technology means that even with social distancing, radio ads can still be made and broadcast safely. Radio. Business as usual, even when it's not business as usual. For more information, email info@fmjunction.ie.
At Life Pharmacy, our focus has always been the well-being and health of our customers and communities, and we continue to provide the medicines, care and expert advice you trust. We're changing some of the ways we work to keep everybody safe. And if you can't come to us, just phone, and in most cases, we can arrange delivery of your medicines and other needs. Find your local Life Pharmacy on lifepharmacy.ie. Together as communities, we'll come through this difficult time. Life Pharmacy. Live better together.
Listen back to your favourite News Talk shows at newstalk.com and on the News Talk app. Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 4 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Burke. New testing criteria for suspected COVID-19 patients will be brought in next week. Currently, only people in at-risk groups with 2 symptoms are eligible. That's being changed, so anyone with a fever, cough or shortness of breath can be tested, but vulnerable groups will still be prioritised. Dublin GP Mark Murphy says there needs to be a quick turnaround to get people's results.
That test needs to happen in a quite expedient manner, and then our public health system will kick in with contact tracing. And through a very rapid way of identification and contact tracing, hopefully we can really minimise community transmission of this virus in Irish society over the coming months.
Health Minister Simon Harris has been addressing a press conference in Dublin in the last few minutes. He says the current systems can handle the numbers. A Green Party MEP says there's a high bar for the party to accept any deal from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. The 2 larger parties are expected to respond in the coming days to the Greens' 17 questions on government formation. Dublin MEP Ciarán Cuff says getting the parliamentary party and members on board won't be easy.
The way our constitution is set up, 2/3 of the members who come to a special meeting
or I guess in this case, who would vote online, presumably, would have to approve of the deal. So the bar is set very high.
Gardaí are continuing to investigate a €1.2 million drug seizure in County Laois last night. The cannabis herb was found in a ditch along a secondary road near the Carlow-Laois border. Gardaí from Arles and Ballylinnan were involved in the operation. No arrests have yet been made. And Tony Christie's 1971 hit Is This the Way to Amarillo has been reissued for a second time with a Peter Kay video featuring NHS workers in the UK. Peter Kay also starred in the first re-release for the Comic Relief back in 2005. Tony Christie says he's very happy to be involved in another fundraiser.
National Health Service is, it's the best in the world. And they really, they're not appreciated as much as they should be, basically. So whatever we can make,
It's 2 minutes past 4.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. For great value van insurance, go to the AA.ie.
Warm and sunny across the country this afternoon, but some heavy showers developing in the late afternoon and evening in Munster, South Leinster and Connacht. Top temperatures of 16 to 20 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
And you're very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of Daniel McDonnell from the Irish Independent, the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward. And now Ger Gilroy, because we're speaking about World Cup 2006. Our football coverage brought to you with thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. Ger, we're delighted to have you on because for 40 days you were in Germany at the World Cup in 2006. Is it branded onto your soul, those 40 days?
Yeah, I mean, it's the opportunity to go to the World Cup in Germany. I came away from it, listening to the lads earlier on talking about how well organised various tournaments have been. I actually came away from that saying the World Cup should be in Germany every year. It's the perfect place for it. It's got a great football tradition. Everything is so well organised, and they understand exactly how to manage crowds and all that kind of stuff. It was brilliant. It was a stunning World Cup to be at.
So you're on the Autobahn. I think you were in a camper van, if I remember at the time.
That is correct. Yeah, we were filming various bits and pieces that were supposed to be on the World Cup coverage, and as time went on, less and less of our stuff was making it to air. So we actually didn't have that much work to do as the tournament went on. Very busy early on, and couldn't actually go to games at the early part because the whole point about the World Cup is that the world's media descends, but then they go away very quickly as soon as the group stages are over. What is this feverish, busy press areas empty out, they hollow out, and there's nobody there. We obviously, from an Irish perspective, would have experience of being part of that morass of people covering the games in Poland and to a lesser extent in France. But once everybody stopped going away, it was actually easy to get tickets. So the only times that I ended up getting tickets for games were the semi-finals and final, and that was kind of a lottery win, really.
Was it, as some texter put a text into us there on 53106, Ger, that it was almost like the German nation, because it was only unified, I suppose, 16 years, really felt that they could be nationalistic and that was okay?
Yeah, one of the best parts that we were able to do was, because we were in a camper van, was travel around. So I remember calling in on Uli Hesse, the German author who'd be a regular guest on Off the Ball over the years. And that was one of the things that I distinctly remember him talking about was the German nation. I don't know that much about German politics, particularly after unification, but that there was a weird kind of sense of, well, how do we actually define ourselves? If you think back to the Miracle of Bern and that movie, there was that World Cup was really important post-war for giving Germany a sense of identity again. And this was an opportunity so Leipzig, for example, there were games in Leipzig. And I remember not really knowing what to expect and driving through and seeing the architecture of East Germany being completely different to what we had experienced in Munich, say. But Leipzig was this amazing town, like a brilliant nightlife, if memory serves me correctly. And also a beautiful city centre. And it was really kind of we could all go to those places and we could all go to Berlin whenever we wanted. We just it wasn't something that you would have thought about that much until cheap Ryanair flights coupled with a football tournament, and suddenly it was like, actually, this is a really good place to go and spend time.
Yeah, lads, have any of you guys been to the eastern side of Germany? Michael Ballack, who was the German captain, grew up in Chemnitz and spent the first 13 years there in Karlmarkstad, I think it was called at the time.
I'm trying to think where Ireland have played. I've been to Germany quite a bit with Ireland games, but Gelsenkirchen, Cologne, various. But no, not been to Leipzig or not been to, other than obviously within Berlin. Not necessarily been to sort of, an eastern part of the country. I mean, it's interesting listening to Ger's story, because I did always feel slightly envious of people who actually covered that tournament in Germany, just because it's so supporter friendly, and sort of imagining what it could be for Ireland. But obviously, I mean, we are in a time at the moment where we're looking for some hope and when some normality will resume. And please by 2024 at least we'll have some form of normality, because we've had like the chaos years of major tournament hosting, and from sort of Russia to Qatar, and I had a great time in Russia, so did you, John. But like the process of how some of these bids were won, and they're not very supporter friendly in some cases, although we can't look at things with too much of a European hat on, because Brazil was great for a lot of people in South America and so on, who could travel by road. But Germany 2024 is something. We're missing football, we're missing tournaments. We're not going to have a summer tournament in 2022. It's going to be Qatar, which is the worst decision of them all. But at least we do have Germany. If there's one tournament in your life you want Ireland to qualify for, surely it's Germany 2024. That is the one.
Gerry, guys, Russia, one thing I really felt from Russia was the melting pot of different nationalities completely randomly put together in a city because their teams were playing there. And sometimes in other cities you might have, 4 nations. Did you get that, the mixture of completely random nations and the party life and the friendships that were fostered back then? Was it like that?
Yeah, it was wild. It was absolutely wild, because it was the first obviously the first time that I'd ever been to any tournament. It was the first time I'd kind of seen the South American fans, and they are absolutely sensational. They're brilliant football fans, and they know exactly how to party and what the whole point of being a football fan is. The one thing that really I remember very strongly was talking to Argentinian fans and talking to Brazilian fans, and they were very fatalistic, defeatist even, about the possibility of a South American team winning on European soil. They were like, it never happens. It just can't happen. It's like, it's going to be a European team that wins it. I thought that was absolute bollocks. I thought I quit. I mean, you've got both brilliant collections of players and World Cup traditions. So why the hell was that? But they turned out to be true. It was the first real time that I remember thinking about football in global terms, and that whole kind of sense of what a nation's football identity is, and how we all feel exactly the same way. Like recently we would have been playing against the Swedes, and they were critical. The Swedish fans that we spoke to and the Swedish media, they were kind of critical of their national team, and it fully rams home the whole bit that like everybody's an expert on their own national team, and everybody is actually slightly defeated, apart from the beer swilling football fans who were like, my team is the best, and that would have been there was plenty of them around as well. A lot of German fans very confident in their team actually.
Is Dortmund as good as they say it is, Ger? Because you were there for the semi.
That semi-final is legitimately the best sports event I think I've ever been at, for loads of different reasons. Like the stadium rocks. Like it definitely feels like it's bouncing up and down. Bear in mind as well, it was like a reduced capacity from what it would be like if Dortmund were there. And I had I got a ticket late to it, so I wasn't sure if I was going to get one, and then so I hadn't built up any expectation about what was going to happen and what it was going to be like. I just thought, okay. And then you get to be like, oh, hang on a second, it's a World Cup semi-final in Dortmund where the Germans are the home team against Italy. Like, this is actually quite a big deal. And the football was Pirlo and Gattuso put together a mesmeric, metronomic performance that I've spoken about again and again and again since, because what Pirlo did on the ball that night was a grip of a match without being physically imposing. It was just balletic. And I always wondered, like, Gattuso played, to me, it seemed way above the level that I thought Gattuso was capable of. He was obviously a very good midfielder, but that night he looked like a truly great world-class footballer. And thinking about it afterwards, it was because he was playing alongside Pirlo. It was like Phil Babb looks like he's a world-class defender playing alongside Paul McGrath against Italy in '94.
On that point, that you're absolutely spot on, Ger. And like Gattuso was, he was a very good player, but let's be honest, he was a very workmanlike player. He worked his ass off to get the ball back, and a bit of an icon in terms of his actual work rate on the pitch. But Pirlo at his best, I mean, if you're talking about the world midfielders, I was debating whether or not Roy Keane would be in my team, my best 11. And when you think of players that literally dictate how a game is run, literally the tempo of the game is through that particular player alone at times. There were very, very few players that could do that. And Pirlo, he at his best, he was just absolutely majestic and, a truly iconic figure. But I completely agree. Like, Gattuso playing with an average midfielder would look pretty average himself. Nobody would look average playing beside Pirlo.
Because this was going to penalties, Ger. That's what people, I think, sometimes forget about it.
Yes, this is after extra time, and the 2 goals come, I think, in the 117th or the 119th, and then I'd actually forgotten it was Del Piero who scored the second one. And yeah, it was. But so the tension ratchets up, and the atmosphere gets louder and louder and louder, and then it comes down as everybody begins to realise, actually, you know what, this is going to go either way, and there's a World Cup final in Berlin in 5 days' time that we're playing for here. The weather was perfect. It was like the best thing that I've ever been at in any sport ever. Like that in the final, even because you had the home team and because you have that atmosphere around it, and just the performance. It was so dominant a performance in a 0-0 draw, which in and of itself is fairly unusual. I haven't watched back the full match, and I kind of don't want to in some ways, in case the magic of getting it's like a Willy Wonka golden ticket. The chocolate probably doesn't taste as nice if you're getting it down the shop.
When you're walking into the Olympic Stadium in Berlin, Ger, are you thinking about Nazi Olympics and Jesse Owens and all that kind of stuff? Because
no.
No,
when we were walking into the Olympic Stadium in Berlin, we bumped into Noel Gallagher and did an interview with him.
That's better.
Put you off a Nazi regime anyway.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about his underpants because there'd been a story 3 days previously that there was something to do with Del Piero and him had become mates somehow, and so he was cheering for Italy, and he had told Del Piero that he was wearing lucky underwear, and Del Piero was like, "Well, don't take them off." The thrust of the 2.5-3 minute conversation that we had, and he was happy to talk to us because he was Irish. We were Irish, sorry. It's like it was just one of those kind of random things that happened in that World Cup where because we'd been traveling around. I remember meeting Paddy Agnew fairly early on in the tournament, and he was like, "These Italians, they actually think they're going to win this thing, And I was like, "God, don't be ridiculous! There's no way this Italian team. They're too old at one end. They're not entirely sure what their best defense is going to be, and beyond that, they're also a squad that's completely riven by this scandal that is surely they're going to be too embarrassed to come out and win this World Cup." And he's like, no. You mark my words, this team are going to go deep into the tournament, and sure enough. But so getting into it, I was very excited to be going to the World Cup final again, last second ticket, and hadn't really thought about the history of the Olympic Stadium at all, to be honest. I guess that's kind of maybe the portents were not something that I was looking at.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think possibly it's also because FIFA brand all their stadiums to take away some of their individuality. But I was going to ask, Ger, can you remember, or I'm even trying to remember myself, who did neutrals want to win the final? Was it France, or was it the Zidane story? Were Italy villains because of what happened, or was there simply, I can't really remember myself. Was everyone just on the Zidane boat? And in Germany, after Germany were done, was everyone just all on board with France because Italy had beaten them, or what was the sort of vibe in the air around who was the neutral's choice in that final?
I definitely think that you're onto something with France being the fairy tale story and the Italians being the villains of the piece. But the weird thing is that Berlin is obviously such a massive city that you could go to the World Cup final that day, you could get up on the morning and footer around Berlin and not be aware that the World Cup final was on. That was the other thing that happened. As soon as the Germans went out, it wasn't that the bunting came down, but the air came out of the balloon really quickly, and the city was not alive for the fact that the World Cup final was on. I remember distinctly heading over that direction and being slightly underwhelmed by what the atmosphere was like in the city. I think Berlin is one of the best cities in the world, and it again has kind of so much going for it, but it has this kind of small neighborhood feel where you can be completely immune to what's going on. So I don't know is the shorter way of answering, even though I've obviously given you a long answer there, Dan. But certainly, my recollection is that the fairy tale narrative was all about Zidane and him kind of cresting to be this all-time great footballer who was about to win and about to drag his team for the second time to a World Cup, which very few people had actually ever done. Kind of even when you think back to Pelé, he's a kid for the first one, injured really badly for the second one, and it's the third one that the team is sensational, but that would be kind of most closely identified with him. Maradona only managed to do it once, and here Zidane was about to become arguably one of the greatest footballers, like, you know, catapulting himself up to that level, and for it to end the way it did, I don't know what impact that has in that conversation.
53106 your text messages. Best thing about the Italy-Germany game was that despite heavy challenges, both teams just got up and played. That is from BJ. Fantastic show, lads. Thank you. What memories of 2006? My whole family, 25 of us, across 3 generations, stayed outside Cologne for 2 weeks with my brother Charlie, Barney Valley's pub in Cologne. Barbecues every night, big screen and marquee. Best time of our lives, that is from Bernard Valley in Bishopstown in Cork. Do not think Zidane overreacted and took a plausible reason to get sent off so that he didn't have to take a decisive penalty. It must have been racing through his mind. No. Missing a penalty is the biggest fear for all players.
He was after scoring a Panenka earlier in the game. He was after chipping a penalty in earlier in the finals. I don't think he was suffering from penalty nerves. Maybe he was afraid he wouldn't ever match the genius of that again. But I'm not buying that theory, I have to say.
You've seen that penalty taken a few times, but like, who in their right mind would do that in the World Cup final and pull it off with about an inch to spare? Like, what a man! On the question of the France-Italy thing, I completely fell in love with that Italian side, and because I backed France, it was kind of like this kind of turmoil in the final, because from Buffon to Pirlo, just Cannavaro, the iconic players they had in that team, and I fell in love with them. And I know you mentioned some of the stuff that had gone on in Italy, Dan, prior to that tournament, but Buffon, in fairness, Buffon stayed with Juve, and I don't think many players would have done that of his calibre, stayed to play in the second tier, and they were just...
but he was still implicated in some of the stuff that went on before it, though. You can't rewrite history completely. You know, great character, great legend, but I mean, it was a sordid enough time in Italian football too.
Ger, you were doing Pirlo watch for the semis, so was it Zidane watch for the final live in the Olympic Stadium?
I missed the headbutt. I absolutely missed it. I actually had not got a clue what had happened. And then, of course, they show a replay, which I didn't see either. And then they stopped on the replay because the crowd went completely mental. And there wasn't fisticuffs, but there was certainly down to my right, there was a bunch of Italians who were up and going, look what he did. And the French people were getting very, because he's just been sent off and he's absolutely the biggest icon that they've ever had. So there was tension. But the other thing about the World Cup final is that there's very few supporters from both teams there. So the atmosphere, I wouldn't have been terribly surprised if a Mexican wave had broken out. Maybe one actually did break out. I'm just trying to think. But even before the penalties, it's the type of atmosphere where you'd be like, oh, for God's sake, don't tell me everybody's going to stand up and do a wave now just before the penalties happen in a World Cup final.
Yeah, the Italians are notoriously bad travellers, though, with their international team. Just when you were talking there about the lack of occasion, the lack of sense of occasion on the day, I don't think the Italian national team has a great reputation for bringing massive travelling fans with it. Like other teams who you'd imagine if they were in the final, they'd have hordes of ticketless fans there taking over the city anyway. The Italians, there's always been that perception that maybe it's because it's a country with such strong club teams, that it doesn't necessarily have the away support that you would have with other nations, and I don't know what the scenario would be with France, but the World Cup finals, getting to a World Cup final is an absolute thrill, but you do almost have to appreciate when you're there how many of the tickets are taken up by by Noel Gallagher, and whoever else happens to be there.
At least he was supporting one of his mates. There was a lot of people who were there who were just corporate tickets. I interviewed Steve Staunton at one point along the way, and I remember so he'd already done the introductory press conference, so we already kind of had a little bit of a sense of what was going to happen. But I remember it's the World Cup and everybody's very excited about football because it was a brilliant World Cup. I don't know if we've made that point enough. That was a brilliant World Cup, brilliantly staged, great football, plenty of controversy. The Messi thing you were talking about earlier on is still, for me, the biggest mistake that anybody has made managing any team in international football. You've got the best footballer in the world ready to come off the bench, and he should have been starting, and he didn't get a minute in the biggest game. So, but I remember Staunton, when I was asking about, like, identifying any trends, you seeing how the game is developing, just kind of shutting down the conversation straight away, like almost as if, no, I'm not going to give anything away here. We're like in a room in Germany, and there's a camera over there recording. I'm going to have information come from this that is going to blow your mind. My sense, like, all right, let's that was it. His paranoia levels had reached so high that he didn't seem to be able to express any kind of sense of joy about being at the World Cup, which I couldn't understand, really.
And Ireland, of course, were playing Germany in his first game, so maybe he was afraid that some Germans nearby were already focused on the first game of Euro 2008 qualifying. But it is strange. Like we spoke earlier, Ger, just about how that German team was like, I went back reading the coverage, and Klinsmann and that Germany team, it was like a reawakening of like attacking positive football. And yet, maybe we were sort of lurching into what was an era that we actually had a lot of very decent players at that time that were at a good age, but we didn't really capitalize on it. Yeah, if you think that if we had qualified for that World Cup, it would have been the World Cup that Roy Keane got to redeem himself, and those players that you guys listed off earlier on, like John O'Shea, Finnan, Dunn wasn't really in the team at that time, as far as I remember, under Brian Kerr. But like there was, he might have played his way back into it by the time the World Cup rolled around. Like it was a really good collection of players, and missing out on that party, like that was a real sense that like we would have enjoyed this World Cup on our doorstep. Like if we qualify for a World Cup, it's far away, or it has been certainly since '94. We could do with qualifying for tournaments that are close to us.
I think,
it's a good thing.
Point, I think that is one thing that the Kenny regime will be definitely divorced from. We were in a group that was probably it was somewhat there for the taking by Irish standards, and as much as we didn't concede many goals, we were very conservative, and ultimately, we were in good positions in games and didn't really seem to have the belief to go through with it. And I think that's one thing going forward. If you look at any of the Kenny teams, particularly the Irish under-21s, if they fall behind or if they go ahead, they're going to play with a similar philosophy. And that would have been a great tournament for Ireland, because we had very good players at the time, like a proper golden generation of players by Irish standards. It's just a shame.
When I watched that Prime movie, I just had that word in my mind was fear. Ireland in that campaign were too fearful in the Israel matches.
Well, do you remember the goal, John, that Israel got? I mean, Shea Given couldn't save it because there were literally 10 Irish players camped around the 18-yard box. He couldn't see the ball. There were that many Irish players camped in front of the goal. And that's basically what, as much as it was a late goal, you don't win games by basically just trying to sit back on your lead the whole time.
In Tel Aviv, Ireland retreated the more the game went on. And in the Argentina-Germany game, they retreated and fear it crept in and they blew it. And that is, to me, the one thing I took out of the whole thing was that it was about fear. And also, interesting what you say, Ger, is it the organisation, is it the country where it's in that allows players, when everything's so brilliantly organised, to play in a certain way, or is that just too simplistic a kind of a view on it?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the atmosphere and the environment is very important. Like we're going to see when the Bundesliga resumes behind closed doors football, what behind closed looks like, and we'll begin to see the importance of the crowds and also the general atmosphere around. Because so England, obviously, this was the Wags World Cup. Is this? Am I right?
Yeah.
Have I got this right? So this is the Wags and Sven and is it Baden where they're all kind of they're away from everywhere, and like they had a decent World Cup. They went out on penalties in the quarterfinal to a decent Portuguese side. So, I don't know if, because retrospectively in all their books, and they all complained about the fact that they were bored and isolated, and that
was 2010 was the one where they were, I think 2010 was the one I thought that they were particularly bored, whereas 06 they had the wives close enough. But I think the German press had a real issue with the wives, because I think they were caricatured as hooligans with Visa cards because of all the shopping binges that the wives were going on. So I think there was some chaotic after party or when they went out, and there's a lot of stories around that tournament. But I don't know if that was the really unhappy Misber one. I thought that was Rustenburg in 2010, but maybe Baden in its own way left a certain legacy too.
Well, then maybe Rustenberg actually proves John's point here that like they played reasonable football in that World Cup, as far as I remember, from an English perspective. But that was a really good England team, and I think that the surroundings obviously have an impact on how happy people are before they go to work. It's not going to be the defining thing. Like, was the football good in the 1978 World Cup? I haven't seen that World Cup movie. Have you done that one yet?
No, we haven't done that one yet. No, and I think the regime will have to get permission from the regime from the past to probably do that one from Argentina. Just to finish, Ger, the aftermath of the final, it goes to penalties. I'd say that was just incredible in itself. And then what happened afterwards? Where was the party with Noel Gallagher that night?
I didn't get the invite for that one. But like, Berlin is a sensational city. Like, there's no two ways about that. It is like one of the best party cities in the world, particularly in summertime. So I've been there in winter, and it's great because obviously they know how to do things in winter. But in summertime, there's like a big area down by one of the rivers, which is like old industrial warehouses that they just turned into a series of nightclubs. And I mean, as you can imagine, the entire world who were there for the football descended on it and stayed there for a couple of days. It was absolutely sensational.
Ger, thanks so much for coming on. Chat to you soon.
No worries. Take care.
Ger Gilroy there with Dan McDonnell and Johnny Ward sharing memories of the 2006 World Cup. If you want to text us, 53106. Back after this.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
This week on Taking Stock, what will be the full impact of the COVID-19 shockwave to the global economy, and what will the future economic landscape and recovery look like? We're joined by world-renowned economic historian Adam Tooze, and David Enrich of the New York Times takes us through the murky but fascinating world of his new book on linking Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump and the last financial crash.
Taking Stock with Vincent Wall.
Brought to you by PwC.
Download the podcast now or tune in Sunday morning at 10.
On News Talk.
The National Standards Authority of Ireland have published a series of business guidance documents to help businesses struggling to deal with the impact of COVID-19. Whether you're a small retailer or a large manufacturer, we can offer you practical steps to help you meet the public health guidelines and reduce the risk of spreading infection. For more information on our guidelines and how to contact us, visit us at nsai.ie. This is an initiative of the Government of Ireland.
At Bank of Ireland, we want our customers and colleagues to stay safe and well. Now more than ever, it's important to know that your financial well-being is our priority. We have a range of supports available for our personal and business customers with easy online applications. Our dedicated staff are working to support you. But if you're cocooning or self-isolating at home, you can now nominate a family member or trusted friend to do your banking for you. We're also giving a €1 million emergency fund to support our communities right now. To find out more, visit bankofireland.com. Take care. Bank of Ireland. Bank of Ireland is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
COVID-19 challenges our well-being in every way, physically, emotionally and financially. So at Leia Healthcare, we're responding by redirecting claims cost savings back to our members. It's just one of the ways we're looking after you and delivering on our promise to you, starting with up to €510 over the next 3 months for a family. To learn more about this or any of the other ways we're supporting you at this time, go to leiahealthcare.ie. Leia Healthcare, looking after you always. Insurance provided by Ellipse Insurance Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare. Leia Healthcare Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare, and Leia Life is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Figure quoted based on 2 adults and 2 children.
COVID-19 is having a big impact on our lives. Everyone has made a huge effort to stop the spread of the virus and to save lives. Thank you. To help us all get through this, it's important that we take care of everyone in our community, not forgetting our own physical and mental well-being. So national and local government, as well as our voluntary and community sectors, have been working on a range of well-being initiatives to help in 3 ways. 1. To help you look after your mental well-being. Healthy Ireland is offering day-to-day coping advice, tips and ideas for gardening, cooking, play for children, activities for young people and more. 2. To help you stay active, with in-home exercise ideas and suggestions from sporting organisations and guidance on how to enjoy the outdoors. 3. To help you stay connected, online libraries, cultural tours, galleries and book clubs, tips on helping in your community, and lots of online workshops are available to join anytime. Discover wellbeing resources to help you and your family and find out what's happening in your county at gov.ie/together. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
Screen Time with John Farty.
This week on Screen Time, I talked to Ricky Gervais about the new series of Afterlife, the Golden Globes, and not drinking in the afternoon.
No, I don't drink in the day. Not yet.
Yeah,
but
well,
there's just one day.
yeah, give it time. Plus, Mark Ryle on more unusual watches during lockdown, and architect and TV personality Hugh Wallace on his favourite movie.
Screen Time with John Farty.
With Elephant and Castle.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast now, or tune in this evening from 6.
On News Talk. Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. The greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
You are very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock. I'm just going to break away from football for a moment because Dan Donnachar is the son of the former Laois footballers Niall and Aisling Donnachar. He was diagnosed with a genetic neuromuscular disease called spinal muscular atrophy, type 1 and scoliosis. And Dan's family are currently trying to raise €2 million to send him to the USA for potentially life-saving treatment. So we're joined on the line by Eric Donovan, a Thai's former European boxing lightweight bronze medalist. Eric, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, John. How are you?
Well, Eric, I'd say I'm in a much more relaxed state than you are because you've been brilliant enough to be skipping for the last 5 hours to help raise funds for Dan. And you've done it.
I've done it, yeah. Jesus, it's an unbelievable accomplishment. I probably didn't realise or look into it too much when I set out to do this challenge. But it was a physical one, it was a enduring one, and it was just really, really mentally tough and physically tough. But you know what? I done it, raised a ton of money. It was a massive success, so I'm delighted.
Congratulations, Eric. How much did you raise?
I set out to raise $5,000. I wanted to raise $1,000 for every hour of skipping, and I'm up to $8,500 now. And I think I've a good feeling that we might reach the $10,000 $10,000 mark. You know, which is just incredible. People are extraordinary. Like, there's ordinary people doing extraordinary things for this campaign, and it just shows you that we're a great nation, we're great people, and rallying around together for such a worthy cause and doing all of this in the middle of a global pandemic, which just makes it even more extraordinary.
Yeah, I think we saw it with Formal Friday as well yesterday. Our campaign, Eric, for the frontline workers, we raised over 150,000, and then obviously this money being raised for Dan as well. I think it's just showing the best of people at the moment, isn't it? People are really sticking together and rallying around and getting on YouTube or getting on the video and trying to do something to help other people.
I agree with you totally. You know, as much as we are in a very serious situation globally here, and there's a recession facing everyone and all that, but it brings it back to basics for people. We're all going back to the simple basic things, looking out for each other, looking out for community, and you can't buy those things. The simple things, they're priceless, and people are, as you said, we're seeing the best in people, and everyone is stepping up to the plate, and the work that the frontline workers are doing, the emergency staff and the medical personnel, they're just heroes. There's so much heroes and legends being thrown around to sporting gods and very talented people in the area of sports and athletics and everything like that. But what these people are doing, to keep us all safe and well, they deserve those accolades and all that credit. Well, I'm immensely proud of them. So we're doing a great job as a nation.
Before today, how long had you skipped for at one time? It looks bloody arduous, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, honestly, people don't realise this, but even though skipping is a massive part of a boxer's training routine and methods and stuff like that, but I would only normally do 10 minutes for a warm-up or 10 minutes for a cool-down the odd time, or maybe there was times where I did 10 3-minute rounds or 12 3-minute rounds on the rope, but you're getting a break after every 3 minutes. So I've never skipped continuous for more than 10 minutes until I made the decision to skip for the 5 hours. And then I did 2 training sessions. One was an hour and a half, and one was 2.5 hours on the rope. The 2.5 hour session was last Monday, and I think it was a bad move by me, because I went into today's 5 hour skipping challenge, and my calves were grateful. And about 20 minutes into the challenge, 20 minutes into the 5 hour challenge, my left calf. Now, if anybody eats Rice Krispies, they'll know the snap, crackle and pop sound. That's what I heard from my left calf, and I just thought, oh my God, I'm going to be just on the ground here in a minute. I'm not going to first. But I was able to kind of just mentally park it and just graft it out. And thank God I don't have any fights up, around the corner or anything like that. I can rest up now for a while. But energy and the cardiovascular system, the mindset, the heart, all of that was perfect. It was like that was on point. But it's just the body, the pressure of the knee joints on the calves, of continuous bouncing non-stop. But look, we got there.
Well, Eric, congratulations. And if people want to donate to the cause here, what link should they go to? And is this available on video if they want to see your pain?
The GoFundMe, my GoFundMe link is on all of the my social media platforms. And can I just say this? It's a sad time for a lot of people. There's a young kid in Clane as well. He's going through a very difficult time. It looks like, the good news anyway, John, it looks like the Do It For Dan has reached the ultimate target of 2 million, which is just incredible. It looks like he's crossed the line, and he's going to we've raised the money to get him the life-saving treatment. So that's just wonderful. Now, there's another young kid in Clane, and there's an online concert going on for him today, for his family, to help with his care. He's a terminal illness. He's only 6 years of age, Rory McDonnell. And again, he has one of these rare, very, very rare conditions, and his future is very bleak. It's after taking his sight, and it's after taking his ability to speak. There's a GoFundMe link on for him at the moment, and there's a live concert, and it started at 12 o'clock today. It's on the Kildare Banter Sessions on Facebook. That's the page, Kildare Banter Sessions on Facebook. Started at 12 o'clock today. It's going on till 9 o'clock tonight. There's a hobby that I have outside of boxing and everything else I do, which is I write a little bit of poetry. And they asked me if I take a slot on this. There's 20 minutes and half-hour slots on this live concert. I'll take a half an hour or 20 minutes to recite some of my poetry for the very first time ever. And I'm going to do that at 5 o'clock today on Kildare Banter Sessions on Facebook. So if people could maybe help out that family there as well. And, I know I'm asking a lot of people here now. I really am. And I can't, I'm just being pulled from every way. But, I think I've done my bit for Dan, and I'm absolutely over the moon, and I'm going to try and help out this family here now as well, the McDonnell family. Roar for Rory is the GoFundMe page, so thanks a million for your time.
Eric, you're an inspiration, and I'm lost for words. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Eric Donovan there. Dan and Johnny, we'll just wrap it up between now and 5 with a bit of football chat. Dan, today, there's so many teams and lists and everything, but you had an interesting article in the Irish Independent today about the best League of Ireland players. You've been counting down from 50 to 1, and you picked your top 10 today.
Yeah, no, I did the top 10 yesterday, but I've done the 50 across the week. Yeah. It's been great. I mean, look, we're all looking for some kind of relief in these times, and we're having a bit of escapism every Saturday, and we did a series across the week looking back the top 50 players of 2000 to 2020, not just on their ability being ranked top to bottom, but also in terms of their contributions to the game. So listen, it's been good fun doing it. Loads of contact from players and people involved, both beforehand for research gathering and then afterwards to maybe complain or compliment or raise some queries. And I mean, the overall point I made, and I know we want to move on to probably our best 11s on that other challenge you wanted to do, but the main point I did sort of take away from it, and we're all missing football, is that when you sit down and go through it, you realise how many good footballers we've had on our shores in the last 20 years at a very turbulent time for football here in many respects, a lot of missed opportunities and waste. But, it's not just about the Seamus Colemans and Kevin Doyles and James McLean and various people who went on to play for their country who've been playing here, but also the likes of Glenn Crowe and Jason Byrne and Owen Heary, and then Joseph Ndo, who was top of the tree, who he played in 98 and he was in the 2002 World Cups. So there's an overlap here. And Kemen chose to spend the best years or the prime years of his career in Ireland, and he was number one for me because he sort of ticked all of the boxes. But we've had some very, very good players through our shores, and it was nice to sort of look back and through it all. I know you had Niall Quinn on during the week talking about maybe options and solutions, and if we're going to get through our 11s, I'm not sure if we've got time to get into that debate, but I think the broader point is that it does seem the new FAI now are probably of the mind to put the League of Ireland at the forefront going forward, and that's important, and I'm encouraged by that.
Well, 53106. Do you agree with Dan's selection of Joseph N'Doh? Johnny, just before we get to your 11 that we've been asking listeners to give, did you agree with Dan, your friend, on Joseph N'Doh being number one?
Yeah. He was a sight to behold. Had the joy of meeting him there ahead of the last big football tournament, actually, the last World Cup, and what a character. You couldn't but fall in love with him. But Dan's piece today on the Independent website, it contains a showreel of his best League of Ireland moments, and it's like this I don't like putting down the League of Ireland, but this lad was a completely different level. You know, he played in 2 World Cups, and his technique, and if you talk to any player who played against him, they always say the same thing. He was just impossible to get the ball off. You know, Dan's task, in fairness, was absolutely impossible. You know, there are so many parameters, but I think he did a good job. But, you know, he was the best, I think, to be fair. He was the best. And as Dan said in the piece, he was worth the admission alone.
Yeah, I think with a lot of these players, and that's what I kind of feel with the League of Ireland, is there's a lot of stalwarts. There's a lot of, sometimes that word is even used in a kind of an only okay way, but there's players like Kevin Hunt and Colin Hawkins and Chris Shields that have been there a long time at their respective clubs and real servants, you know. And
I suppose, John, when I started following the League of Ireland, which was I looked at the match programme for my first game the other day, and it was hard not to feel nostalgic, but that was 1997, and so I followed it from then on. And in those early years when they played winter football, it was very often not very good to watch. And what would happen would be you'd go to a game in Talca Park, Shells would be playing, it'd be on a bad pitch, and it'd be a lot of kick and rush stuff, but Tony Sheridan would be playing. And Tony Sheridan would do something in the 80th minute that you're like, okay, that finally justified my existence today, because he was just capable of this unbelievable brilliance. Same with Liam Coyle, players like that. Same with Joseph N'Doh. But the difference, I would say now, is that you have these players in the league. You have the likes of your Jack Burns, your Danny Mandroyus, and your Patrick McElhenney's, but they're surrounded by very good players. And the commitment to playing football is completely different because of the quality of the pitches and just the way the game has evolved in Ireland. And I used to go to the League of Ireland games expecting a bad game with the odd flash of brilliance. Now I get flashes of brilliance, but very good football consistently. And I think the league is really on the up, and I think it's going to be an exciting time whenever it does return.
And possibly behind a digital paywall, as Niall Quinn was telling us during the week. Dan, did you pick 11? Did you pick your team this week? I'm not going to do it this week. I'm going to do mine next week, because I haven't spent enough time on it. I'm not going to embarrass myself and shame myself for the nation and never be trusted again as a source of credibility. Not that I have much of it. But Dan, did you pick your 11?
Maybe if you told us where you were for the rest of the 06 games.
Well, you know, I bore people enough every Saturday, and I'm getting away with it so far. So
don't be harsh. Do not be harsh.
Yeah.
I did do this today. I sort of hadn't got around to it mainly because I've been working on that top 50 list. But yeah, as you said, 11 players. None of them, 11 different nationalities represented, and no two of them could have played for the same club, which is the key point. Because, for example, so I'll go through my team because I know time is is creeping up on us. So I went for Dasayev, the Russian goalkeeper. He was the Russian goalkeeper in Euro '88. I know Lev Yashin is the star, but then I realised it had to be in your lifetime that they'd played. So Yashin was out for me, and Dasayev was the one. But he actually had a brief stint with Sevilla, and that actually killed me later on, because a lot of good players had time at Sevilla, like Maradona and quite a few others. Ramos, yeah. various stages. So I went for Dasayev in goals. I hope there's no mistakes here. That I had Seamus Coleman for the Irish flag at right back. Obviously, a one-club man in terms of elite football. None of these other lads played for Sligo, I don't think. Paolo Maldini at centre half. Someone you mentioned earlier, Maldini, again, a one-club man, Milan. Frank Leboeuf, Chelsea and Marseille were his main clubs, and he's the French representative. Philippe Lam at left back. Then my midfield, Steven Gerrard, again, no LA Galaxy players in here, otherwise very Liverpool. Enzo Schifo from Belgium.
Wow, what a player.
Belgium and Inter Milan and Monaco and a couple of other teams. So I wanted to get a Belgian player in, and he was the one who didn't overlap, I hope, with any of these players. Then I had Ryan Giggs on one wing with the Manchester United and Wales, obviously, in another sort of one club stalwart. And then I had to get an Argentina player in, and it was a bit of a challenge. But I went for Jorge Burruchaga, who was the goal scorer in 1986. He might need Maradona's passes maybe to shine, but he played for Nantes. Was the main club he was at, but otherwise in South America. So Burruchaga's in there for me. And then my front two, Preben Elkjaer, Denmark, one of the stars of that Denmark team of the 80s, but didn't necessarily play with high-profile clubs, Verona and Cologne. And then just to be the head of the social party for the team nights out, I've gone for Tino Asprilla for Colombia, Parma. I'm not sure he'd get on with Seamus Coleman in terms of like the very different lifestyle choices around the dressing room, but I think he'd bring a bit of flair. It mightn't be the best team in the world, but it ticks the boxes and strong in certain areas.
Very original as well, Dan. Johnny?
Well, that's absolutely bizarre, the team he's picked there. I mean, I haven't even heard of some of these players, not to mind, knew them as players. I picked one player from that team on my team. And I guess he was probably a very popular pick. But anyway, I'll get to that in a moment. So there's also a chance that there's some rule broken here, because I did this today. As I said, I consulted with my AstroTurf WhatsApp group, and they actually just wrecked my head. They kept like making my choices harder and harder. So anyway, this is what I came up with. Peter Cech's in goal. Yeah. Okay. So Peter Cech's in goal. Philip Lahm, fullback. Paolo Maldini, the other. Diego Godin and Vincent Kompany, the centre backs. Midfield, Roy Keane, Zinedine Zidane, and this one I love, Socrates.
Yeah.
Right. So he was around kind of when I was born, and what a cult figure he was. Front three of Lionel Messi, Alan Shearer, and Erling Haaland, who I think is going to be an absolute superstar. He's only played for a wet week, but he's Danish, and I lost the will to live at that stage.
I feel like I want to run through Johnny's team again to see has he ticked all the boxes there. But I'm trusting that you have, John. You've done your homework and where they've all played.
Well, Owen Garvin has texted to say it's not a bad team. And what are you going to say about Socrates? I've seen a lot of him. And Owen Garvin wouldn't have been out of place in that team either.
We got some in from listeners as well. Chilavert, Bergamy, McGrath, Ramos, Cole, Mateus, Zico, Platini, Messi, Dalglish and Van Basten. Lam, Oblak and goal. Lam, Thiago Silva, Chiellini, Irwin, Conte, David Silva, Modric, Messi, Cavani and Mane. Now, we can't check these, but we obviously trust that everybody is on the right show. Peter Shilton, this is from 72. Maldini, Godin, Carvalho, McGrath, David Silva, Johan Cruyff, Zico, Gerd Muller, Zidane and Kenny Dalglish. Hours of head scratching to pick this. That's from James of Waterford. Fair play to James for getting in touch. And Shane from City West, Dasayev, Nielsen, Olsen, Adams, Hart, Mateus, Dunga, Ronaldo, don't know which one, Maradona, Totti and Van Basten. So I don't think there's a right answer for this, guys. I think that's why it is such fun.
Yeah, another mate has just texted me, and a quote from Socrates: "To find yourself, think for yourself." I think that might be a different Socrates, though.
Yeah, I was just looking up his clubs there, and I got the Wikipedia entry for the other Socrates, which is slightly confusing for a minute.
He was up front for Limassol in his day or something like
that. We have 53106 as well for the text. Ger Gilroy was spot on talking about the 2006 World Cup. The organisation was amazing. I'm going to 2024, whether we're there or not, the Republic of Ireland, on our train to Cologne, to Berlin, as they apologise for the train leaving 2 minutes late. Being half Italian growing up in South Africa, I always put my money on Italy. 2006 World Cup, I put €30 in Italy to win outright, had the ticket up to 5 days before the final, then it disappeared. That is from Warren in Cork. He was gutted. Fair play, Warren. And Dennis Desmond on YouTube, the Brazil team on paper was world-class. Kaká, Ronaldinho, Adriano, Ronaldo, Juninho. Unfortunately, half of them were overweight and party animals. Is this a runner, this league behind a paywall? Will enough people subscribe to it? Will they generate revenue from it? Is it pie in the sky, or is it actually a really good idea?
I think like it's see, in different leagues, I mean, different things. Obviously, the Premier League, it's going to be massively successful because there'll be global demand all hours of the day. But in our league here, and I said you actually significantly spoke to Niall Quinn this week, and he touched on it. And this is what's happening in Ireland, is that ultimately they're reliant on FIFA. And not reliant, but waiting to see, because FIFA have indicated they're going to have packages available for countries. And what Niall Quinn and the FAI have asked their clubs to do is, who don't want to do it ultimately because, you know, there's many reasons why it wouldn't work here. Notwithstanding the public health reasons, let's just imagine that that's okay, and that's a big if, massive if, right? But just in terms of the practicalities of doing it, that they've asked the clubs to come back and say, how much money will this cost you? If you normally take in X amount on match day, and you think streaming will generate Y, you know, by how many people might realistically pay for it, then can FIFA or other rescue supports provide enough money to plug the gap so you get back going again. I'd be pretty sceptical, I have to say, but I think it's worth exploring it to see if FIFA are willing to give a lot of money. They've already released some advance money already. And obviously, you know, players at some point, this is their livelihoods and they rely on it, and they need this work just like a lot of other people in other industries need work. So I understand why it's worth exploring it. But for me, I'm not sure if the games in Ireland are going to generate enough through streaming revenue to close the gap. But I'd like to see the figures probably on paper just to fully make that decision. And that's obviously what the FAI stands. Unless they know something we don't about the package that's going to be available, then maybe it becomes feasible. But there's a lot of cost issues with it that I would be slightly wary about, I must say.
I think it could work, but like, you know, I put forward this idea that it could definitely work, but only as a stopgap. I mean, if you're going to be playing like for 2 or 3 months of this, like I couldn't see how that would work. But my notion would be that you'd have it for a month just to get us back on the road. But I've no idea what's going to happen in other leagues as well. I'm very intrigued by what happens in the traditional winter leagues, because they're in a very different situation. And in Ireland, if it did happen that the season was scrapped, at least it's very early days. But I think it's encouraging that the FEI are very proactive on this, and I think Niall Quinn must have something up his sleeve, because as one club representative said to me today, if this happened with the old FEI regime, you can imagine like how it would have dealt with it. But I still think streaming has potential in terms of a fundraiser in truly extraordinary times.
I just think FIFA's intervention is maybe it's just good business practice at the moment with, I think it's a 462,000 that every association is getting around the world. But I just do find it interesting in the future, long term, when everything settles down and society returns to normal, hopefully, and we're all praying that that's the case, and football does return, that FIFA now maybe being a bit more visible and a bit more of a contributor towards associations is interesting, because obviously they've got their own plans with the Club World Cup is something that Infantino likes, and that was something that kind of crept into my head. Maybe I'm being cynical, and about their goodwill, and obviously it's great to see that they're doing this for associations, but that is something that did creep into my head, that that FIFA actually, I've never heard FIFA really associated with Irish football, and apart from the other thing, the 5 million.
Yeah.
You know,
I know we're wrapping up, but yeah, I mean, FIFA, we do World Cups every week. The recent history of FIFA is tainted by a lot of scandals, but they have a lot of money, John. They have a lot of money, and we never hear about them using it. So maybe this is their opportunity to do that.
Well, they did give us the 5 million, Dan.
That's very true. One of the great moments of our last 20 years, John.
Guys, next week we're doing 1986, so this will be good. It'll be Diego Maradona week next week.
Excellent. Yeah, so we were 3.5 at the time. I wonder how many games we watched.
Not many. But lads, it'd be great today. Thanks so much for the chat and the memories.
Thanks,
John.
JD.
That's Daniel McDonnell.
Very disappointed after all your chat, you didn't come up with your own 11 as well. What was going on there?
I was just trying to get ready. I was trying to get myself in the zone for this chat, and then I just said, you know what, my credibility will be shot if I do this in the back of a fag packet in 20 minutes. So I'm actually going to write it next week. So I'm cheating. So
not having it, JD.
We'll do it next week. Thanks, lads. So don't forget, Off the Ball Sunday tomorrow with Joe Molloy in the chair from 1 o'clock, who'll be joined by the former Arsenal and England defender Lee Dixon for a look back upon his career. Really looking forward to that. And then there's a paper review with Kieran Cunningham and Cleona Foley. We'll hear from the talented Conor Moore, the impressionist, on Golf Weekly. Then between 5 and 6, our rugby expert Neil Tracy will be speaking to the former Leinster and Ireland hooker Shane Byrne. Remember, please, to check out our podcast network on offtheball.com for all the highlights of our shows, including our Saturday panel conversation today with Ross Whittaker and Kevin Brannigan about the making of a sports documentary, and our World Cup 2006 chat with Dan, with Johnny and with Ger Gilroy. Thanks for listening this afternoon. Please stay safe. Bye-bye.